Welcome to episode 184 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Lisa Moorish about her electronic pop opus, Divine Chaos, her first album in 20 years. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to Sananda Maitreya about his new album, The Pegasus Project. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe in your favourite listening platform, give us a rating, and leave a comment. Singer-songwriter and indie dance pop icon Lisa Moorish returns to music after a 20-year hiatus with her new album, Divine Chaos. In this interview, Lisa takes a deep dive into the writing and recording of the album and lots more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Lisa Moorish. Hi Lisa, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Very nice to be here.
I'm loving the album. The new album's just about to come out, but before we get into that, I'd like to go back to the start. Can you remember the first band or artist that made you pay attention to music?
It's a really funny one because I remember being around 3 years old and my mother had an album by Kiki D. I'm laughing. And I really liked the cover, and I can sort of even vaguely see it, even now in my mind's eye, the 3-year-old's sort of eyes. And and she played a lot of Kiki D. So, and I can't really remember any of her music, but I remember running around with the LP cover around the living room and dancing with it and sort of loving the image. So that was first, I guess, like an album, because my family played a lot of music. Had lots and lots of records, my dad and my stepdad. So, yeah, and I think one of the very first artists which I heard non-stop, which, if I'm honest, I kind of rebelled against and didn't like for some of the years of my kind of growing up. But my early years I did, because it's all we heard was a lot of Bob Marley and reggae. So Bob Marley was a big sort of music hero. Nothing maybe particularly, there's probably no similarities you'd hear in my music. But I'd say he was a great pop songwriter, I would say. Probably maybe a confident thing to say about him. So I guess even, learning to write songs or writing songs when I started, there's this kind of format, I guess. I don't know. That he wrote sort of big, epic hit songs as well as the kind of more sort of underground sort of roots reggae stuff. So yeah, a bit of a weird one. And then I would say an artist that made me first think I want to be in a band and I want to be a singer, something I want to do, was probably Blondie, Debbie Harry. I went to a friend's house, my dad's friend's house, and their 13-year-old daughter. I think I was about 9. I can't remember how old I was when the album came out. And it was, oh God, I'm showing my I've forgotten now, the black and white album on black and white cover, and they're all dressed in black and white.
Parallel Lines?
Parallel Lines.
Yeah.
Come on, Lisa. It's my age. Yeah. They made me as well. Parallel Lines, of course. So she had that album and she was playing me the music, the songs, and I was like, and I just loved the way she looked. And I made my mum buy me a black and white t-shirt and a black and white skirt from Brixton Market. So there was loads of it around. So, yeah.
Well, funny you mentioned Kiki D. When I was a kid, I seen her on Top of the Pops with Elton John singing Don't Go Breaking My Heart. And I think she was my first crush.
Oh, there you go. So I think many boys of a certain age group. So there you go. But I can't honestly say I know any of her songs now. So, yeah, I would say Debbie Harry definitively was the artist that I first thought, I want to do that and I want to be like her. I want to sing and dance around like her and perform. And so that was that first, connection with that.
Can you remember the first record you ever bought?
Yes, it was nothing like Blondie, actually. It was, what was it? I think it was Raw Silk, Do It to the Music, which is a soul record. Do you know it? Do you know Raw Silk? Do you know your soul? You've got your soul underneath. No. Because there was a lot of... I listened and I still do love a lot of soul, 80s soul music. And there's an artist called Raw Silk. Do it, do it, do it, do it to the music. You know, I don't know that song? No. Know it if you heard it. people out there might know it. But so yeah, it was a soul record. But I bought it in Woolworths in Brixton, and then another one I bought, I think, straight after that. This is eclectic taste. Was 99 Red Balloons. Nina Hagen, who was it? No, not Nina Hagen. Who was the singer?
Yes.
Oh,
It was Nina. I don't know her surname.
Yeah, I thought it was Hagen, but I'm getting mixed up with another Nina. I'm getting her mixed up with another artist. 99 Red Balloons was those two, very different. So I liked really different sounds. Still do.
Yeah, I know that. I think she originally released it in German and then did the English version, which was the hit.
I learnt it.
Did you?
In German. Yes, I did. And the single I bought had the words in German and English. I'm not going to do,
right.
do it, but I could still remember some of the German, some of it in German.
I think everybody bought their first record in Woolworths, didn't they? It's a pity it's not around anymore, because I definitely got my first single in Woolies.
Yeah, I mean, what a great experience when you're a kid going into Woolies and getting your little 7 inches. Amazing. So I had loads. I think every Saturday I'd go and buy one.
Yeah, I was the same. Has music always been the career path you wanted to follow, or did you have other ambitions growing up?
Well, there is something in that place. I had some weird things that I wanted to do or be. And I mean, the core of it, the essence of sort of me, even as a child, was always sort of singing and dancing around. And that's what I was always doing, showing off, as my mum would call it then. But yeah, I wanted to be a criminal pathologist at one point. I wanted to be get into law. I still I feel like my brain is a little too old to make, but I've thought very seriously about in recent years getting into law. I've got a lawyer in the family. I was talking to and I was working with a lawyer, or not working with a lawyer, being represented by a lawyer for a case. And I was saying, I really want to get into law. And he was like, you probably do it. Go for it. Go for it. I was like, I want to do humanitarian law. He's like, there's no money in that. Of course, there's no money in humanitarian law. But yeah, I've got a real fascination with it. And I've picked up some stuff, legal stuff, via cases going off on one day, nothing to do with music. Having said that, you've got famous Judge Jules, the DJ, who was a lawyer and became a DJ. And with a few other artists, I think artists that have always been, singers, whatever, producers, DJs, and some of them have sort of, hit the sort of rock bottom and the burnout of a music career, and have often sort of thought, right, I want to do something else completely different. And there's some relationship there. I don't know what the psychology behind that is, but there is something there. So we never know. Not much money in music anymore.
No, there's definitely not.
No.
I first heard of you way back in 1989 when you had the club hit Rock to the Beat. Great track. I was listening to it recently again on YouTube. What can you remember about how that track came about and about those times?
So I had a manager at the time called Dennis Ingleby, who started managing me when I was 17. I had this really crappy demo that I'd made with these lovely, really sweet guys. I can't remember their names. I'd actually love to get in touch with them. They signed me when I was 16 for a two single deal, and I did this demo, and it was like a country and western song. I don't mind I'm a massive Dolly Parton fan, by the way. And anyway, so I did this sort of not great song sort of demo, but it showed my voice off. So I was able to get this manager, Dennis Ingleby, who'd managed Bros previously. And then he went on to manage Eternal and a few other big artists. And he loved my voice. So he took me into Battery Studios to Jive Records, to Zomba in Willesden. And I met an A&R man who was one of the main A&R guys called Neil Watson. And he liked my voice and he sort of said, right, we want to see, can you write songs? I don't think I'd ever really at that point even tried to write my own songs. I kind of was like, well, I don't know. So they said, we're going to put you in one of the writing suites. They had the big studios and they had lots of these little writing suites, writing booths. So they gave me what was Rock to the Beat, which at the time, before I did my version, was just rock to the beat, rock to the beat. That's it. He said, just see if you can write some verses in the breaks, in the instrumental parts. So I said, okay. So they sat me in and I just went for it and wrote a couple of verses and they were like, wow, great, we really like it. So they sent me off to Detroit to get into the studio with Kevin Saunderson. So I went in with him. It was a weird experience, actually. I haven't talked about this much because his wife, I don't know if she's his wife now, he wanted her to be the songwriter. So they decided to scrap my words, and they used some of the melodies, but they wanted her to write the words. So they sort of changed it. It was a really strange experience. I think he just was looking out for his wife, and he was trying to build her career as well as a writer and singer. So that kind of went a bit weird. And then I was sent to the studio with Juan Atkins to vocal it and record it, which was incredible. We had this huge barn studio in Detroit, just in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that was a mad experience. I'd been to America, but I went when I was 13 to New York, and I'd travelled actually with the band Steel Pulse on tour because my father was the lighting engineer for Steel Pulse. So I'd been to America, but I had never been to somewhere like Detroit. It was mad. It was like being in a scene from RoboCop. It was, the devastation. And obviously what was going on there with all the sort of, it's the car sort of centre of car industry, wasn't it? I don't know if it still is now. And that had all fallen apart. So it was, completely destroyed as a city. And it was just an insane experience. So yeah, so that was that. And then it came out and it was received pretty well. I think it was number one in the charts briefly. And DJs were playing it. So it was a really exciting time. And I loved acid house. I mean, I was going to raves at that point. So to make a record that was part of that was just a mad experience. And for my mates, they were like, what? Yeah. So yeah.
How long was it after that? Because you released a debut album, I've Got to Have It All, in the 90s. So what was the gap between putting that single out and then putting your debut album out?
Yeah, so I signed after I had two singles. So the second single I did with Jive was a cover of Going Back to My Roots, the Lamont Dozier song, and it was produced by Paul Weller and Mick Talbot. And the reason I asked them to produce it and wanted that, it was my idea, was because they had a period where they were getting into acid house, and they were obviously going out and kind of having this experience, and they did a cover of Promised Land, and it was received quite well. But this version they kind of went for an R&B sound. It didn't really work. It wasn't really them. And I think Paul Weller said to me once when I bumped into him, that was shit, wasn't it, that record? Well, actually, I thought for me it was wrong because I was 17 and I'm like, but it didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to. Sometimes things don't. But after that, they didn't continue and didn't want to make an album with me at Zon, but I went on to be signed for singles deal with Polydor. So I had a couple of years, or about a year and a half signed to them. And I think we released one single. I was rapping on these singles because I was doing a bit of rapping at the time. And I was doing sort of hip hop Radio 1 sort of shows and whatnot. It's funny, the sort of spectrum of what I've done. So, but that the single didn't do that well. And then there was another one I released with them, and they kind of like top 50 or something like that. So it wasn't enough to give me an album deal, and they sort of decided to cut ties with me. So that's what I was doing in that gap. And then I spent a period before I got signed to Go Beat where I wasn't doing anything, and I was just back sort of working on the doors of clubs and just sort of, making demos, trying to get myself sort of, into a situation where I could get another deal and put my music out.
And then you recorded a version of the Wham hit "I'm Your Man" with George Michael and backing vocals, and it was a top 20 hit, and George Michael, legend, brilliant song. What was that like?
That was absolutely insane. That story is a weird one. I was recording my album in Psalm West Studios with producer John Douglas and co-writing it with him, and we'd all heard that George had come in and was in the studio downstairs making his. What was he doing? Because it was a funny one. So at that point, he was in a fight with Sony Records, with Sony Music, because I can't remember. Do you remember what it was?
When he put out Listen Without Prejudice, he just wanted to have the music out, and he didn't want to be involved in the videos and stuff. He didn't want to be. He just wanted to let the music do the talking.
Yeah, and I think they stopped him from releasing his contracts. Sort of prevented him from doing anything else apart from that, something like that.
Yeah.
So he was obviously just recording, I guess. But it was quite a sort of, and he'd sort of, you know, as the great guy he was, he sort of stuck his fingers up to the music industry. He was like, well, I'll do what I want. So anyway, our what we call T-boy, that would sound insulting saying that, but that's what the position was in the studio when someone's working their way up. And he was giving us all the tours downstairs, and he was talking to the other T-boy about us, and we were actually making this version, and it was just a coincidence. It was a complete coincidence, and I still can't really believe that we had decided. It was my idea to do it. I was a massive Wham fan, huge George Michael fan, and it was just, let's do something weird, you know, let's take a sort of, you know, this is a 80s pop song and we're going to do an R&B version, and we were kind of going along the sort of lines of TLC and that kind of American Austin Dallas sort of sound. And basically he ended up sending a thing back saying, I'd like to hear it, like a little message back up. The sort of boys were running up and down the stairs. So I wasn't there, I think. I was really freaked out because he was such a big star to me. And I know people like to kind of always do this thing, and especially in this day and age, like, oh, you know, celebrities and worshipping this person or that person, but it was George and Michael.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't ever want to be cool with that. There's some, you know, that's my take on it. There's some people that are heroes to us in that way and musically, and I don't want to be the person who's like, oh, well, you know, it's only so-and-so. So my producer I think I said I'm too nervous to kind of come. And I think the producer's, I think it's best that I just play it to him. And he wasn't sure about meeting me at that point, because I guess he could have heard it and it could have been hard shit, to be frank. Yeah. So he heard it and he said, I love it. And he heard my other single, Mr. Friday Night. And I think, what was the word? My producer said, that's absolutely delicious, or something he said about that song, which I love. And so, yeah, he said, I'd like to sing on it. So we had ourselves a duet. But the thing is, when it was released, he said, you can't use my name because of the contract. So you're going to just release it like this mystery. So it kind of backfired because we couldn't tell. Radio couldn't say it. It got A-listed at Radio 1. So it was one of those weird things in life and timing where it could have been such a huge, huge thing. Because I think if he'd have promoted it and he could have put his name to it, it would have flown and been sort of top 5 at least. I mean, he went on to do it live later. Never did it with me, unfortunately. I didn't get that call. And he worked with John Douglas on Fast Love. Production's quite similar to my album. You can hear that in those tracks. So that was a really, really great thing. But I was really freaked out. And every time he came in the room, I'd kind of just go, you know, and just wouldn't be able to. And he was like, what's wrong with her? But we did end up out one night. And I ended up dragging him back to someone's house to a party, and he was with all his friends. And he was home with my mom. So, oh, just leave them and come with us. And I knew some of the people with us, and I dragged him, and I'd had a couple of drinks, so I was a bit more courage, you know, to talk to him on a level. And that was an incredible night. So that was the only time I sort of really got to hang out with him just as people, and you know. But yeah, what a legend. Missed, very missed.
Yeah, very, very, very much missed. During the Britpop era, you recorded vocals and tracks by some of the biggest bands from that era, including Oasis, Blur, and Ash from Northern Ireland. You know, even looking back in my memories from the Britpop era, it was amazing. What's your memories? What stands out for you?
I mean, it's funny because I'd made this album and I was releasing these sort of R&B pop records with these big house mixes, which are really from the album. I mean, most people know songs are more famous for the remixes of them. So it's still very much in that house area. So I was coming out of that, and I had this flatmate, Rebecca, and her friend she was dating Noel, and I didn't know who they were. And my other friends were like, I wasn't really into this sort of the kind of band thing, put it that way. And I did, like I say, I liked rock music growing up, and sort of, you know, obviously being sort of Blondie fan and whatnot, and there were various other things I liked with guitar bands growing up, but I really wasn't in that space. So I'm like, okay, who's this band, Oasis, you know? And so it's a weird sort of crossover for me, but we were all going to the same kind of award ceremonies and events, so it was just like a crew of people, you know, all of us artists in our 20s who were all kind of, you know, we sort of became good friends, and obviously all of the craziness, you know, the parties and all that, it's all true. So, you know, it's the parties. But yeah, so Yeah, and I think you end up in that situation. Like, I suppose working with Oasis, the reason I ended up singing on something with them was, my friendship with. I mean, obviously, people seem to focus much more on my relationship was with Liam, but Noel and I were really good friends. He was like a big brother to me, and he really liked my voice. And actually, I remember him playing when we first met at my friend's flat, and I hadn't heard anything about Oasis. I was not in that, I was in house clubs still, going out sort of raving. So he played I Want to Talk Tonight on a cassette tape. And I was like, wow, I really love this. And he played some other Oasis stuff, but that's the song I really liked. And it was with him singing. So he really liked that because I said, I really love this song. And yeah, we became friends. And then I think it was one of those things you just say, you sit, come down the studio, we need vocals for this, we need vocals for that. And obviously the song that I sing on, which is from
Fade Away.
That album, Fade Away, thank you. So I ended up getting a call to come, and obviously there were people like Johnny Depp on it and this one and that one, but I was the only professional vocalist, female vocalist that sang on that. So yeah, and it was just as simple as that. And then Alex from Blur used to get me in to do demos just for that. He was messing around with his mates with Alex. Damon got me in to do a really lovely B-side. And every time I see him, I ask him what about this, and I can never remember what he's. I really need to know what it is. But I was walking around Portobello one afternoon, and he came out the studio. He's like, "Oh, quick, come in the studio. I need you to come and have a sing on this track." But I can't even tell you what it is. And then Alex and Graham got me in to sing. This is the weirdest thing I've ever done. They redid a version of. This is terrible. I'm like someone's grandma, aren't I? So it was off the first album, and it was the song that Alex sang about the planets, and I can't remember. Anyway,
I know what it is, but I can't remember.
Good. I'm glad you can't either. So, so it's not just me, but I should know. But I didn't know you were going to ask me, so I'm not prepared. But yeah, so anyway, this to get to cut to the chase, the song was going to be put into a time capsule with a Damien Hirst painting and various other things I can't remember to be sent to Mars.
Right.
And I can't remember anything else about this project. It's absolutely batshit crazy. But I was like, yeah, I'm into it. It's mad, So that was that, and that's just how it was. It's like a community of artists, and this is how it is, and it always has been. I think it's like when you look at the generation before us lot, people kind of just, hey, you want to come and sing on this, or let's go and play on something, which is really great. And I think that's the way music's always been, and always will be, really, when you get a group of artists. We don't just go to parties, or we didn't just go to parties. There's actual music in there.
There's music made in between.
Yeah. Well, it was parties between. I'm not sure which one. Yeah, a long time ago, though. And Ash came about because of Owen Morris, because obviously he knew me through Liam and Noel. So he got me in and asked me to come down and sing on the Ash song. Oh, yeah, remember that, which is such a great track. I really love that track. So that's really nice as well to do that. Yeah.
Well, this summer, we'll release Divine Chaos, your first solo album in more than 20 years. What was the catalyst that made you go, right, after all these years, I'm going to make more music?
I really had kind of put it on the back burner, so to speak, and wasn't sure if I really wanted to do it again. I didn't know if I'd do it again. And the reasons for that are various. One, I had children, and I made the decision when I was having my children that that part of going on the road and pursuing a sort of big music career wasn't really going to happen. But I still worked in music, but I needed to sort of venture into other things. One of those was acting, so I got into that. A little bit of that, which was good, a bit of theatre and whatnot. But so that was one of the reasons. And one of the other reasons was just the relentless sort of, focus on my personal life, getting hacked by the tabloids, targeted by them constantly. And, I was kind of like, you know what, nobody wants to hear me sing. And none that sounds really general and dramatic, but that's what it felt like. And I felt quite betrayed by the industry, and I felt very unsupported. We hear lots of sort of stories like, I'm going to get my violin out. But that's how I felt at the time, and that's what was happening. So I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do other things. And it meant that I could be a more present mother as well. But I still wanted to work in music. It wasn't for the want of trying to carry on with a career, but I wasn't allowed to just make music. I was just constantly being judged and spoken about my personal life. It's just the UK and how the media, as most people know, work. So I just sort of thought, what, I can't be asked to fight this. I sort of lost that. I thought, what am I fighting here? So anyway, a couple of years ago, Irvine Welsh is a really good friend of mine and the label boss of the label that the album's coming out on, Jack Said What. He started up a label, but actually just before that, he has basically written a musical of Train Spotting, a musical version, which hopefully will be opening at some point at the end of the year or beginning of next year. And he gave me a call and said, look, will you come down and sing on some of the demos that him and Steve Mack, my other label boss, had. They've been writing these songs. So I went down and I thought I was just going to be singing, doing vocals for them. And then I ended up actually co-writing on a couple of the tracks, which was fantastic. And it just, something came back in me, that sort of light sort of reignited. And also just having really great friends who believe in you and they just love what you do and your talent and whatever. And that was Irvine and Steve. And they were really encouraged me to get back into it. So I kind of did. And then I'm like, you guys have got a label, a record out with you guys, because I thought if I do put a record out, I don't want to go chasing record label. It's very different to when I last had a record out. I mean, I'm still getting used to how it's working with streaming services and whatnot, and how your Instagram and your social media accounts that's where you're putting music out. Really weird. I'm quite against it. Well, it's just, everything's just, and I don't want to sound like that old fart, but even for young artists, it's really difficult out there. Live venues, they're shutting down, and and because of governments not supporting the arts. But anyway, so I got back into it, and I thought at the end of the day, and having said all of what I've just said, I wanted to make music again. It wasn't, regardless of whether I'd make money or I could sell records, or, that I can't sell records anymore. It might be tricky to get out live and be able to afford to pay musicians. I just want to make a record because that's what I do, is make music and I write songs. So yeah, I blame Irvine Welsh for that.
Well, it's a fantastic record. I've been really, really enjoying it. And you've definitely returned back to your musical roots with the album. But when did it start? When did you first go into the studio? What was the first track you cut?
So I was looking for a collaborator because I write lyrics and melodies mostly. I don't really play anything, very loosely, and I'm not, I can't really program that well. I'm very basic, as in programming sounds and music. So I was looking for a collaborator, and I thought, I'd really like to work with a woman, and I know it shouldn't matter, and I don't want it to, and I don't think it does, but I'd never really worked with a female artist, producer or co-writer in that context of sort of creating a new project and making an album. So I found my co-producer and co-writer, Zoe Devlin Love, who is one of Alabama 3. She sings with them. For anyone that doesn't know, she's an incredible talent. She's a brilliant, great singer herself. She's got her own thing, but she was getting into production. This was her first proper sort of production, basically, as a full album. She's produced things, but it was the first album she'd produced. So yeah, I dove into her DMs on Instagram, as you do these days, right? This is how things are. So I said, do you fancy doing some writing? And she's like, well, what's your aim? What do you want to do? I was like, I don't really know, but I want to make another album. And to be honest, we started off, I didn't really know where I was going with it necessarily as far as the sound and what I was trying to do, but I just needed to get in with someone and create something. Mm-hmm. And the first track we did was way off, and we sort of went away and sat with it. I said, you know what, this is not right. This isn't working. And it was quite good. It was nice. It was a good track, but I don't want to make nice tracks and good tracks. I will say that. I want to make things that I go, yeah, I would listen to that. I would buy that. So yeah, we went in again, and she said, look, let's get some sort of pointers of what you want it to get a real good idea of what you want it to be and get that clear in your head. And I did. And we started kind of listening. I started to listen to things and kind of go, yeah, that's because I don't really produce myself. It's, working with a producer, but I had a very definite idea of what sound I wanted for each song. So the first song we wrote together, and it was like, yes, we've done it. We've arrived. I think was Divine Chaos.
That's the opening track, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great track, and I'd already written that. Actually, to tell the truth, before I got together with Zoe, I was writing in lockdown. I was playing around a little bit with my now ex-partner, because he's a producer as well, and we were just messing around. So I'd come up with that idea and had that sort of in the drawer, so to speak. So I grabbed that out and said to her, I want to kind of do something with this, especially because it's more spoken as well. So I fancy doing something like that. So yeah, and then we were off and running.
Yeah, and you released Sylvia as the first single, which was inspired by the American poet and novelist Sylvia Plath, because people said you look like, and you do look like her, very, very similar resemblance there. And that's a great track. What can you tell me about it?
Yeah, it's wild, that whole thing where we look alike. I mean, I'm mixed race, half English, half Jamaican, from Brixton. She's from Boston, and she's a white American, like German American heritage. Really strange. So yeah, I'd known about this sort of, someone had pointed out to me about 10 years ago and said, that Sylvia Plath is your doppelganger. What are you talking about? And I wasn't really I knew, sad to say, the story, the sort of sad way that her demise came about. And so I kind of knew who she was, and it had been a film, but I'd never really kind of read anything of hers. And I started to get more connected with her, and I sort of read The Bell Jar, and this is sort of years ago, about 10 years ago. So when it came around to writing, Zoe and I writing the songs, and I was thinking very clearly and consciously about what I wanted, what this album would be. And I had a thing, I think I'm a big Lou Reed fan, actually, Velvet Underground, Lou Reed. And I learned a lot about the way he wrote songs and the purposefulness of him writing about other people as well, about characters and people he came across. And obviously Sylvia's very, very famous, but it was simple as that, because I thought I've written a couple of songs which are very personal on this album, and they relate to my sort of relationship or whatever, my past relationship now. And I thought I don't want it to be one of those like, oh, this album's about, because I find that kind of boring, and it's just not what I wanted to do. So yeah, and I thought, what can we do that's a bit different here? And I thought, and we had this we came up with this groove, and we were like, yeah, this is what we want the groove to be like. And it just sort of came, really. And I was feeling at that time, I was kind of relating just to certain things as a woman, who I am and whatnot. And she came to mind. So that's, how it came up.
Yeah, it's a fantastic track. And I also love the remix by my fellow countryman, David Holmes.
Yes, you Belfast boys. Yeah, it's brilliant. And David Holmes is amazing. So to get that from him was just, the cherry on the top, so to speak, a few cherries on the top of that cake. So yeah, and it's a great remix. I knew I wanted it to be, and I kept saying it has to be David Holmes, because once the track was finished, I thought, I know who this should be. And luckily he said yes, because I kind of had that. I was fixated on him doing that particular track. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great track. But there's some tracks on the album that are based on the 80s gothic movie The Hunger with David Bowie and Susan Sarandon. There's the Hunger song, and obviously near the end there's Susan and David.
Yeah.
Why are you so inspired by that movie?
Well, so The Hunger, I'm laughing as I say this because at confession time, I was really big into vampire and Dracula movies as a kid. So I'm a product of the 80s, and growing up in my house, it was, TV things that were on the TV. There were the big soaps, and then there was Hammer House of Horror. So the cat's at my door. Sorry. They're distracted. Hello. So it was, I was really big into sort of films. I was massive Vincent Price, what's his name? Who played Dracula? The main ones.
Peter Cushing.
But Vincent Price, I think, mostly. And I had this, I was really big into it. And I don't know if that's because it makes you sound weird, but I think a lot of people were. They were big, it was a big storyline and a big sort of thing, wasn't it? At certain, well, as it still is to a point. But so when I saw The Hunger, which wasn't when it came out, because I think I was only about 10 or 12 or something when that came out. I don't think I saw it till much later. But I was like, wow, a vampire movie with David Bowie. Do you say Bowie or Bowie?
Bowie.
What do you say?
I say David Bowie. I know people say Bowie. Over
Yeah,
here,
it is Bowie. It is
over,
Bowie, and
yeah,
like,
over here it's
anyway,
Bowie.
whatever he said, he probably said Bowie, didn't he? So David Bowie, Susan Sarandon, and Catherine Deneuve. I'm like, wow, this, and it was, and Bauhaus, and I am a bit of a secret goth. I do like some Mercy. I like a bit of that. So I just loved it. The imagery, especially the way it looks, and you've got the music element with David Bowie, and you've got Bauhaus in it. So I always loved that movie, and that's another thing with, like I said, thinking purposefully about what I was doing with this album and what the songs were going to be about. And one thing I always love doing as well is being inspired by films. So because I love films, I think everyone does. It feels like a really stupid statement when people say, "Oh, I love films." It's like most people do. Not everybody does though. I do meet people who are like, "Oh, I don't really go to films." I mean, I'll go to the cinema twice a week if there's things good enough to watch, even sometimes when there's not. So yeah, I do like I do go for movie titles as well, and I think I've done that in the past, and I can't think of a good example of that. But actually, you've just mentioned Susan and David. That isn't in reference to Susan Sarandon and David Bowie, actually, and I didn't even realise that was.
Is it not?
I want to pretend that it is, but it isn't.
Right, I thought it was obviously Susan Sarandon and David Bowie. I
should have gone along with it, really, shouldn't I? Because it would be much cooler if that was the case. It's not. It's a thing about two people who their nicknames that they call each other, basically. Right. Susan, all right, David. It seems really silly, but that's what it is.
I just thought it was all part of it.
No, I've ruined it now, haven't I? I should have just lied, but never mind.
Obviously, most of the album's all upbeat, and you can dance about to it. But my favourite song on the album is Tied to the Wind. It's a huge, epic track, with Kate Bush vibes, and it really, really shows off your voice.
Oh, Tied to the Wires. Do you mean the sort of, is it Tied to the Wires, you mean? Yeah. Oh, that's lovely that's your favourite. I'm really happy about that, because it's not something that I maybe thought people would go for as a favourite. And it's a really beautiful track, and that is about my dad. So my dad passed away 2 years ago now, and so I wrote that about him. It's tied to the wires. It's literally when someone's in hospital and they're sort of connected, and it's the only thing that's keeping them going. So sorry out there. Everyone's like, oh God, how depressing. But it is what it is, and it inspired a beautiful song. So that's for Dad, that song.
Yeah, it certainly does. And as I say, it really shows off your voice, and it comes at a point in the album you're not expecting, everything to sort of chill out a bit, So it's really beautiful track.
Oh, I'm really glad that's your favourite. I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, and it was beautiful. It's good to do it because it's nice to, and that word, I sort of cringe at the word ballad.
Well, I didn't want to say ballad.
I know, exactly. That's what I mean. It's got it's a dirty word, isn't it? It's a ballad, but it is kind of a ballad. And when if you put it in terms of an Irish person saying the ballad of whatever, and the ballad of, then it sort of becomes a bit cooler again. So if you think of it in that context and put the Irishness to it, of the word ballad, then it sounds cool. But yeah, so it is. Yeah, it was nice to kind of have something like that, where it's just for sort of beautiful sort of sounds, and without it kind of being driven by a heavy sort of electronic beat or whatever.
Yeah. That's why I was super surprised that sort of arrived at that point in the album, and it was a pleasant surprise. We must talk about the next single that's coming out off the album, Social Prayer.
Yeah.
And it's Kate Bush, and then, I was reading in the press release, Annie Lennox sort of vibes to it as well.
I think so. Do you? I mean, funny enough, this is a thing when you the label, when people ask you sort of like, what would you say it sounds like? Who would you say? And it's really difficult to kind of, you feel like a bit of a twat ever doing that, really, as an artist, and you don't want to ever do it. But of course, you want maybe people are getting press releases or looking at whatever, like, oh, okay, see if it is, and you hope that they agree then. But it's just the hints of that. And I'm very inspired by Eurythmics, Annie Lennox, Kate Bush. Obviously, most artists are. I would say a lot. So yeah, it's got and yeah, because it's just in my DNA. And that at the 80s was being exposed to music in the 80s from around 10, and sort of those early teenage years had a huge impact. I think, like I said, as I was imprinted on your DNA. There's a lot of that 80s thing in my musical DNA, shall we say.
Well, I grew up in the 80s as well. It's definitely the best era for music, in my opinion.
Yeah,
100%.
it's about. I mean, it's sort of there's a ridiculousness of it, but there is. You go. I think now we can say that there was a time. I think. Well, I suppose especially in the 90s, the sort of decade after that, where it was like the 80s was sort of mocked and, it was what's it, kind of golden top of the pops moments or whatever. But it has done now. I think people can go, wow, and they are incredible artists from that period. There's no denying that,
Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, every song that came on the radio or every song that was on Top of the Pops, they all sounded completely different.
Yeah, that's true, actually. They did. And yeah, I've never even really thought about that till you've just said that. And especially in a time, and again, I'm going to sound like an old fart, where some things they just sound the same.
Yeah.
I mean, am I being a hypocrite saying that my album, agreeing that my album's inspired? But it's inspired by, that's a different thing. It's just that thing where now I think there is, if the radio, I don't listen to radio, mainstream radio, I was going to know shows, then I better not. I don't listen to mainstream radio, but when you turn it on, a lot of it, it's like, and it's just, if you listen to Catch or in a cab or something, it's like, I've just heard 5 songs and they all the singer sounds exactly, the voice sounds the same. But I get, this is how things are marketed and it's where we're at and what. But, we're in a weird time, aren't we, with social media. And I was talking to someone recently and he showed me an artist on Instagram and he said, and she was a great singer, beautiful girl. She was an incredible singer and she was singing on the guitar. But he said, she's never performed live, apart from live to a phone or whatever, a camera. Wow. And she had, 100,000 followers and this huge fan base, but she'd never, ever played live or something. And I'm not knocking her because that's probably not her. I'm just making that point that now we're in a very weird time with music where maybe young people don't feel that they need to go and plug in at a venue. And I think that's kind of weird, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, I think and there's a few reasons for that, because obviously social media seems to be the priority of a place that you need to get your success. So the more hits and the more whatever, and everybody, and probably repeating things that people are listening have heard a million times over, but it's true. And for example, I'm kind of looking at doing gigs at the moment. I'm just starting to kind of find venues for promo gigs, really, before the album comes out. And you're at a stage now when I speak to venues, and a lot of them are talking to you about a higher cost to play at their venues. And I'm like, wow, is that where we are now? Because the last time I was in a band in Kill City, sort of around 2003, 4, 5, you got paid something if you played at a venue. Even if it was the minimum, like is 50 quid and a rider, you got paid something to compensate you for providing live music, and that's even in the lowest tier of music where you have another hit or whatever and people aren't buying tickets. But now artists, I guess, are trying to, get out there and play and promote their music and just play live. And they're looking at paying the venue. I mean, it's absolutely insane. But then I had a conversation with someone and I said, look, I'm probably got people coming and, I've definitely have people coming. You're going to have people buying drinks. I'm providing entertainment. I'm not asking to be paid for these promo gigs, and I kind of was like, it's not what I'm looking for, to pay you to hire a space. But she came back and she said, look, we are struggling as well. So this is the thing. And I realized, and so we're in a really difficult situation, a bit of a crisis with music. Venues are not necessarily being exploitative, but they're up against, their backs are against the wall because they're looking at closing down and they're not making enough money.
And they also charge bands for merch as well, percentage.
Venues I'd say, I don't really know. We did have merch with my band, but I can't remember what that. So was that a new thing then? Because I think
it's a new thing. I think Tim Burgess. I've seen Tim Burgess online on Twitter.
Yeah,
just making statements about it.
Yeah, and I would say that there's obviously possibly very successful venues doing that will be being exploitative. But I think there are, in all honesty, independent venues and little venues who are trying to stay open. And of course, people can't afford. I'm hearing this thing now. Someone was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were like, apparently, young people don't really drink much like really young people, they go to, don't know if that's true, but not in the way and maybe one of the reasons I suppose is you can't afford it. So people are having a few drinks at home first and whatever. So people are not buying drinks when they're at the venue and they're not paying, and venues are struggling. And after COVID, there was no help, was there really, from the jolly old Tories. So
No.
we're all told to go and start driving Ubers, and there's nothing wrong with being an Uber driver at all. But to sort of say to people who've had music and been artists and have actually maybe sold records and done whatever and paid tax, and to be then told, tough shit, go and get a job somewhere else and whatever, just, we're not going to help you. When music has brought in so much revenue into this country. So anyway, that's me and my...
No, it's crazy how much bands or artists are out there now making music, and people think they're making millions, but they're actually having to hold down jobs. They're doing what they're doing.
That's the reality. I've got other things I'm doing. I have to, because I couldn't just survive on just making music right now. And even if, this is the first time I've only had 2 singles out, even if it was to completely blow up. Snoop Dogg, I don't know if you saw it, there was a clip of him that went round recently where he said, if I've had 1 billion streams on Spotify, where's my, whatever, I should have blah, 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 whatever he said. But you get the gist of what I'm saying, is that something's seriously wrong here. So, and that's really tricky, because you're kind of, as an artist, if you're not on that sort of train, then you feel like you're not part of the music industry. So some people are trying to kind of go, well, I'm not uploading my music to this platform or that platform because we don't get paid. But there's not enough of a, with the sad thing in America with the actors, with the pay and the rights and whatnot, it was challenged, and it was sort of, something has to be there has to be a bit of an uprising, and it's not happening, and I don't know why. And there's something really weird going on with that needs to change.
Yeah, but unfortunately, artists need to be on the streaming services, because it's a brilliant way, as much as they don't get money from it, it's a brilliant way for fans to discover their music, and then maybe go out and buy the physical album or CD or whatever, or go buy a ticket to go and see them on tour if they're playing at the venue.
Yeah, of course, it's exposure. But what I'm saying is, you don't sell, people don't really buy records anymore. So there's no, and the thing is, okay, let's be honest. If you're a number one, so look at people like Taylor Swift or whatever, and you get really, lucky or whatever, or you just, you make so much money. So there's always been that imbalance. There's been arguments there with like, why do, some artists, it's ridiculous how much money they make, whatever, but just, I'm talking about artists just to be able to go and play and be paid. There was, when I started playing a bit in Europe, so the minimum they would pay a band to play, this is an unknown band, not selling tickets, before around 400 quid. And in the UK, it's always been around 50 quid. There's just that thing with that sort of shit, such sort of disrespect and kind of, you were doing you a favor, and that, like I said, that exploitative thing. And I think artists deserve to be able to kind of make music and not have to kind of hold down 3 other jobs, within reason. And I know, I suppose the problem is, how many releases are there every week? I don't know if you know. Someone was telling me it was something like 100,000 or something mad. So there's the other thing with streaming services, is that anybody can say, I'm an artist, and I'm, that wasn't the way it used to work with, obviously, record labels. That wasn't necessarily the right thing either, where they made the decisions about who the public should have access to and hear and get exposure. They would get that wrong, But there's somewhere in the middle there. Do you know what I mean? That it's a weird time for music. It's a weird time for a lot of things, but for music and for young artists, I feel for them, the way things are.
Just a few more, Lisa. I like to ask my guests the following questions. If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career, what would it be?
Well, if I could go back, it would be just with George Michael again in the room, where I just hadn't been such an idiot and just wasn't so and to have that experience again where I could actually talk and string a sentence together because I couldn't really speak around him apart from the one night we went for a party that I dragged him to. So yeah, I think I'd probably go back to that.
For us music fans, music is the soundtrack to our memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
Oh, that's such a question. There's so many. I think the one that's coming to my mind though is Bob Marley, because it was the years of my kind of formative years with my dad around and growing up in Brixton. Like Bob Marley and going to see Steel Pulse as well, who my dad worked with. So it was very much around the reggae thing for me, actually. Yeah. But lots of others. But yeah, that's probably the main one I would say.
What song or album is your guilty pleasure?
ABBA.
Everybody says ABBA.
Oh, I know. I didn't know that said the song or the album. There was one song. Oh God, I'm trying to think what it is. It's my favourite. That's the name of the game. Na, 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 na. Does it mean anything to you?
That's it. That's what you call it. That's the name of the game.
No. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that one. That's my absolute favourite ABBA song. And it's one of my favourite songs. So everyone says ABBA, right? I'm trying to think of something else then, just to be weirder. There's got to be something. I do like a lot of those guilty pleasure type songs that you wouldn't necessarily... I can't think of anything. We'll be here all day. So no, but we'll say ABBA. But I wish I could think of something that was a little bit more, different to everyone else. But unfortunately, I can't right now.
So that's me done. Lisa, is there anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up? What's coming up in the immediate future?
Well, just to say that the album is out on the 12th of July. So buckle up, guys. No, I hope... I hope people kind of get to hear it and I'm just really excited about it. Really, that's to have a new album out.
Well, if people want to buy it, where do they go to buy it?
Well, so Bandcamp, you'll be able to buy the album on Bandcamp, definitely. And it was available on Amazon as well. It'll be available on Amazon to buy as well, Amazon Music. Brilliant, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love this platform. It's brilliant. XS Noize.
Yeah. Oh, thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you, Lisa. Enjoy the rest of your day.
I will. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.